In 1962, a woman disappeared so completely that people searched for her for decades. And then, in 2025, a detective dialed a number, and she answered. They did not find her in the woods. They did not find her in a river. They found her alive. This is the kind of story that makes you question everything you think you know about missing persons cases. Because when we hear about someone disappearing, we assume the worst. We picture tragedy. We imagine something terrible happened. But sometimes, rarely, but sometimes, the truth is stranger and more unsettling than any theory we could come up with. Date, place, name, age. That is all that stays constant in a case that sat in the archives for over 6 decades. July 7, 1962. Audrey Backeberg, 20 years old, disappears from Reedsburg, Wisconsin. It is summer, the kind of summer where everything feels possible, where the roads stretch out endlessly and the future seems like something you could just drive into. Audrey is young. She is a babysitter for a local family. On that day, she is with the family, this babysitter. They are traveling together. The version recorded in case files and publications. The family babysitter says they hitchhiked to Madison, then took a Greyhound bus to Indianapolis. And after that their paths split. That is it. That is where the trail ends in 1962. Madison to Indianapolis on a Greyhound. 2 young women traveling through the Midwest in the early 60s. And then, nothing. No phone call, no letter, no sighting. Audrey Backeberg steps off that bus in Indianapolis and disappears into thin air. And here's the thing. 62 years later, it turns out she went missing. She disappeared on purpose. When someone disappears, there is a window, a crucial period where every hour matters, where leads are fresh, where witnesses remember details. Investigators in 1962 would have worked that window hard. They checked leads. They interviewed witnesses. They tracked possible routes. They would have contacted bus stations, shown her photo around Indianapolis, followed up on any tips that came in. Because that is what you do when a young woman vanishes without a trace. But here's what happens with missing persons cases. If you do not find something in those first weeks, the trail gets colder. Memories fade, people move on, other cases pile up, and eventually, the active investigation slows down. The case does not close. Cold cases rarely officially close, but it becomes one of those files that sits in a drawer, waiting for new information, waiting for a break, waiting for someone to remember something they forgot to mention decades ago. Over time, the Audrey Backeberg case became exactly that kind of case. A cold case, the only thing that stays solid, the last confirmed route, Reedsburg right pointing arrow Madison right pointing arrow Indianapolis. And after that, nothing. No body, no witnesses, not a single reliable lead about what happened to Audrey Backeberg after that day in July 1962. Think about that for a second. In a world that is increasingly connected, where it is harder and harder to truly disappear, someone managed to vanish completely in 1962 and stay vanished for more than 6 decades. People disappear in different ways. Some leave because they are running from something. Some are taken against their will. Some meet with accidents in places where they are never found. But to disappear so completely that you do not surface for an entire lifetime, that is almost impossible. Almost. There is something haunting about missing person files. They are simultaneously full of information and completely empty. In official records and on the missing person poster, it says, disappearance date July 7, 1962, location Reedsburg, and basic descriptors. Height, weight, hair color, eye color, what she was wearing that day. The mechanical details that reduce a whole person to a checklist. Stamps, old photographs, the kind with that distinctive 1960s quality. Slightly faded, frozen in time. Case files that get thinner every year from the lack of new information. Every anniversary of the disappearance, maybe someone pulls the file, looks through it one more time, hoping to see something that was missed before. But there is nothing to see. The file is complete in its incompleteness. Everything that could be documented has been documented. The problem is not missing paperwork, it is a missing person. Decades passed, technology changed. The world that Audrey Backeberg disappeared from became unrecognizable. The internet was invented. Databases were created. DNA testing became standard. Genealogy websites emerged. The tools that modern investigators use would seem like science fiction to the investigators working the case in 1962. But the Audrey Backeberg case remained a closed book without a final page. until 2025. Here is something you need to understand about cold cases. They are not really cold in the sense of being frozen. They are more like embers. They are still there, still technically active, just not burning hot anymore. And sometimes, not often, but sometimes, someone comes along and fans those embers back into flames. In 2025, the investigation gets reopened as part of a review, and it is led by Detective Isaac Hansen from Sauk County. According to AP, he took the case in February 2025 and went through the materials again. Now, reopening a cold case does not mean much if you are just reading the same old files. Hansen could have looked at the same witness statements that investigators looked at in 1962, the same reports, the same dead ends. That would not get him anywhere. But Hansen had something the 1962 investigators did not have: modern tools. And this is where the modern part of the story begins. No chases. No suspect. No dramatic confrontation. Just documents, records, databases, and one lead that didn't exist before because the technology to create that lead hadn't been invented yet. This is the quiet power of modern detective work. It is not flashy. It is methodical. It is about having access to information that previous generations of investigators could never have dreamed of. Think about what an investigator in 1962 had to work with. Phone calls, letters, physical records stored in filing cabinets. To check if someone was living in another state, you have to contact that state's police department, who would then have to manually search their own records. Everything was local, disconnected, isolated. A detective in 2025 has something that investigators in 1962 could only dream about: genealogical databases, online registries, digital archives. The entire country, hell, the entire world, connected through searchable databases. Hansen uses genealogical and online records, plus data from Ancestry, described in media as access through an account or relatives' data, to search for traces in registries. This is where modern genealogy research has revolutionized cold cases. It is not just about finding criminals anymore. It is about finding anyone who left a paper trail, no matter how faint. Step by step, Hansen reconstructs possible trajectories. He cross-references data. He matches names and dates. He looks for patterns, for connections, for that one thread that might lead somewhere. And eventually, he lands on a current address, not a historical address, not a place she lived in 1962. A current address, meaning someone matching her information is living somewhere, right now, registered in some system that Hansen can access. He asks the local sheriff's office to do a welfare check at the location. This is standard procedure. You do not just show up at someone's door after 62 years and say, "Hey, did you used to be someone else?" You work through proper channels. You have local law enforcement make contact first. If the address is right, it means one thing: the person is not somewhere in the abstract sense. She is in the system. She has a life. She exists in official records. And then the main question changes from, where is she, to, why did she disappear? Here's where the story gets really interesting. Because this is not a case where investigators found someone who was trying to hide. This is not someone who refused to confirm their identity or ran when confronted. According to AP, after a visit from a local officer and a check, the woman herself reaches out to the detective and confirms her identity. Read that again. She reaches out. She confirms her identity. This is not someone who was kidnapped and held against her will for 62 years. This is not someone who lost her memory and did not know who she was. This is someone who knew exactly who she was, where she came from, and what she left behind. And when found, she acknowledged it. Official statement: she was found outside Wisconsin, alive and well. In statements and reports, they emphasize this was a voluntary disappearance, with no signs of crime or foul play. Let that sink in. Voluntary. No crime. No foul play. Audrey Backeberg did not disappear because someone took her. She disappeared because she chose to. She walked away from her life in Reedsburg, Wisconsin, in July 1962, and built a completely new life somewhere else. And she did it so successfully that it took 62 years and modern technology to find her. Now, I know what you were thinking, because I had the same thoughts when I first heard this story. There are obvious questions, obvious objections, so let us address them. You might object that this is mistaken identity, but the confirmation happened through a combination of documents, address, and direct contact. The conclusion was announced officially by Sauk County authorities. This is not a guess based on a fuzzy photo or a similar name. This is verified through multiple sources, confirmed by the person herself. This is not a case of, we think we found her. This is, we found her, and she confirmed who she is. You might object that the location was not revealed, so the story is not convincing, but they publicly emphasize privacy in the absence of crime. Details are not released out of respect for a person who lived more than 6 decades out of the spotlight. Think about it from her perspective. She chose to leave her old life. She built a new one. After 62 years, investigators find her, and she confirms her identity. But she is not a criminal. She did not hurt anyone. She has a right to privacy. The lack of details is not hiding something. It is protection. It is respecting that she is a person who made a choice. And even though that choice caused pain to others, she is still entitled to live her life without the whole world knowing where she is. You might object that the motives are not explained, so the case is incomplete, but motives have not been fully disclosed officially. And here's where it gets complicated. Several publications mention problems in the marriage, allegations of abuse, and even a police report. But that is context from media reports, not official statements. The official statement focuses on voluntary, no foul play. And there is a reason for that, because motive is personal. Motive is complicated. Maybe she was running from abuse. Maybe she was running from expectations. Maybe she was running from a life she didn't choose. We do not know, and maybe we do not need to know. The lack of explanation doesn't cancel out the fact. The fact is, she left. She stayed gone. And when found, she was alive. You might object that in 62 years someone would recognize her. But people change. Cities are big, and someone who truly wants to disappear avoids places and people from their old life. Time erases faces better than any mask. Think about how much people change between 20 and 82 years old. Think about how easy it would be to move to a different state, use a different name, avoid any connection to your past. In 1962, before the internet, before social media, before digital records were everywhere, it would have been even easier. You could truly start over. And if you were careful, if you never went back, if you never contacted anyone from your old life, you could stay disappeared. Maybe this was an escape from danger. Maybe it was an escape from a life that became unbearable. Maybe it was something else entirely, something we cannot understand without having walked in her shoes. But only one thing is known for sure. She chose to disappear. And she succeeded. In disappearance stories, we are used to looking for death. We are conditioned to expect the worst. When someone goes missing, we imagine bodies in shallow graves, accidents in remote locations, foul play that was never discovered. But sometimes the truth is different. A person chooses to disappear, and the world lives with emptiness for decades. Relatives, friends, investigators, all of them spent years trying to figure out what happened to Audrey Backeberg. They probably imagined every possible scenario. They probably feared the worst. They probably hoped for the best. But none of them imagined this, that she was just living somewhere far away, under a different name, in a different life. And the most terrifying part here is not how. The most terrifying part is how long uncertainty can last when the last confirmed point just stops. 62 years, more than 6 decades of one person, whose life that became emptiness for another person. A question without an answer, pain that has no closure. Think about the people she left behind. Parents, maybe siblings, friends, a husband. They spent 62 years not knowing if she was alive or dead, not knowing if they should grieve or hope, not knowing if they ever have answers. And now they have an answer. But is it the answer they wanted? Is it closure? Or is it just a different kind of pain? The Audrey Backeberg case is not a detective story in the classic sense. There is no killer, no kidnapping victim, not even a victim in the usual sense. There is only a choice, and the consequences of that choice stretched across an entire lifetime. In cases where someone disappears, facts are the only thing that does not betray you. Fact 1. Audrey Backeberg disappeared on July 7, 1962, from Reedsburg, Wisconsin. Fact 2. Detective Isaac Hansen found her alive in 2025. Fact 3. She disappeared voluntarily. Everything else, assumptions, context, unfinished stories of those left behind. And maybe the most important question here, why did she leave? But how many people live with a disappearance that never ends? Because for those left behind, the story does not end with the finding. It remains a forever open wound with a start date, but no end date. 62 years lost, for some, as a life in the shadows. For others, as a life under a new sun. And both of these lives are real. Both of these lives matter. One person, this escape is another person, this nightmare. One person, this new beginning is another person, this eternal ending. That is the real horror of this story. Not that someone disappeared, but that someone could disappear so completely, so successfully, that it took more than half a century to find them. And when they were found, there was no crime to solve, no justice to serve, no resolution that makes everyone whole. Just a choice. And the ripples of that choice, spreading out across decades, touching lives that never got closure, creating holes that could never be filled. In quiet fear, we hold on to facts, because in cases where someone disappears, facts are the only thing that does not lie, does not fade, does not change with time. The facts are simple. She left. She stayed gone. She was found. Everything else is just us trying to make sense of something that might never make sense. And maybe that is the most unsettling part of all.